Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it. I had always taken pride in my garden. The neat rows of tomatoes, cucumbers, and vibrant flower beds were the result of countless hours of work. It was my sanctuary, a place where I could escape the drudgery of daily life and feel a sense of peace. That is, until the Petersons moved in next door. At first, I thought nothing of their 3 young boys, who spent their days shrieking and darting between houses like wild animals. But soon, I started noticing something disturbing. Every morning, I found trampled plants, broken stems, and uprooted vegetables. My garden was turning into a wasteland. One evening, as I stood by the fence inspecting the damage, I saw them, Nathan, Sam, and Leo, running through my garden, kicking dirt and stomping over my delicate seedlings as if they were nothing more than playground obstacles. My blood boiled. "Hey, get out of there!" I shouted, storming toward them. The boys exchanged mischievous grins before dashing back toward their house. I marched straight to their front door and knocked. After a few moments, Mrs. Peterson opened the door, looking mildly irritated, as if I had interrupted something important. "Ah, Mr. Clark," she said, barely concealing her impatience. "What is it?" "Your kids have been trampling my garden again," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I've asked them to stop, but it keeps happening. Could you talk to them?" She sighed dramatically and crossed her arms. "Oh, come on. They're just kids. They don't mean any harm. They've ruined half my vegetable patch," I countered. "It's not just harmless play. I've worked hard on that garden." Just then, Mr. Peterson appeared behind her, a smirk already forming on his lips. "Boys will be boys," he said with a chuckle. "Maybe you should build a taller fence if it bothers you so much." "A fence? So it's my responsibility to keep your kids from destroying my property?" "Exactly," he said, grinning wider. "Or better yet, lighten up a little. It's just a few plants." I clenched my fists, swallowing my anger. "I'm asking you one last time. Tell them to stop." Mrs. Peterson waved the hand dismissively. "We're not going to punish them for having fun. If you don't like it, that's your problem." With that, she shut the door in my face. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the closed door, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. This wasn't over. If they wouldn't listen to reason, I'd find another way to put an end to their destruction. As I walked back to my devastated garden, I heard the boys laughing in the distance. It wasn't just childish mischief anymore, it was deliberate, and I knew then that things were only going to escalate from here. I had hoped my firm warnings would deter them, that perhaps their parents would finally discipline them, but instead, the destruction grew bolder. At first, it was just a few broken stems, a trampled row of carrots. Then, the real vandalism began. One morning, stepping out with my watering can, I was met with a sickening sight. The scarecrow I had carefully crafted stood burnt to a crisp, its remains still smoldering in the early sunlight. Nearby, my wooden garden bench glistened with a thick coat of gutulin, a black shoe polish-like substance that had soaked into the grain of the wood. The sight made my stomach churn with fury. I clenched my fists, marching straight to the Petersons' house. When Mr. Peterson opened the door, he looked at me with the same smug indifference as before. "Ah, Robert," he said, crossing his arms. "What is it now?" "Your boys set fire to my scarecrow," I said, barely containing my anger, "and they smeared gutulin all over my bench." "Enough is enough," he snorted. "Do you have proof?" I faltered. The evidence was obvious, but no, I hadn't caught them in the act. His smirk widened. "Then it's just your word against theirs." His wife, standing behind him, smirked as well. "You do love to make a fuss, don't you?" Before I could respond, a loud crash echoed from my garden. I spun around and my heart sank. One of my decorative glass lanterns shattered, and there, grinning like devils, were the Peterson boys, peeking over the fence. I turned back to their father, my voice shaking. "You think this is funny? They're just kids, Robert," he shrugged. "Let them have their fun." Fury burned in my chest. Fun? Fun was playing ball or climbing trees, not setting fires and destroying a person's hard work. I exhaled sharply, forcing myself to stay calm. "If you won't stop them," I said, "then I will." I turned on my heel and left, their laughter ringing in my ears. I had tried being reasonable. I had tried warnings. Now it was time for action. Enough was enough. If the Petersons refused to discipline their brats, I would make sure the little devils learned a lesson, without breaking the law, of course. The first step was the motion-activated sprinklers. I installed them at strategic points along the garden's edge, carefully angling them toward the most trampled areas. The moment someone stepped too close, they would get a sudden high-pressure spray of water. The second measure took more effort, but the results would be worth it. I dug a few shallow pits along the main footpaths, filling them with water and covering them with thin branches and leaves. It wouldn't cause injury, just an unexpected, muddy surprise for any intruder. That evening, I sat by my window waiting. It didn't take long. The Peterson boys, emboldened by their parents' indifference, crept into my yard, giggling to themselves. One aimed a rock at my freshly planted tomatoes. Just as he took a step forward, whoosh! A jet of water hit him square in the face. He yelped, stumbling backward. The second boy spun around to run, but splash! His foot sank straight into one of my disguised pits. "What the hell?" the first boy shouted, wiping his drenched face. The second scrambled out of the pit, now soaked in muddy water. "Let's get out of here." I watched as they bolted back over the fence, leaving a trail of wet footprints. I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. The real fun, however, came the next afternoon. Their father, oblivious to my new security measures, stomped onto my property, no doubt intending to confront me for his boy's wet misfortune. He took one step too far. Whoosh! A direct hit from the sprinkler. "Damn it," he roared, shaking his fists. As he stumbled backward, his foot found one of the pits. Splash! Down he went. I stepped outside, feigning concern. "Oh dear, Mr. Peterson, are you all right?" His face twisted with rage. You did this on purpose." I crossed my arms. "I simply installed security measures. If your family didn't trespass, this wouldn't be a problem." He glared at me, soaked and humiliated. "You'll regret this." I gave him a polite smile. "We'll see." But as I shut the door behind me, I knew this was far from over. I should have expected retaliation. After soaking Mr. Peterson and humiliating his boys, it was only a matter of time before they struck back. But I never imagined they'd stoop this low. It started subtly. One morning, I stepped outside to find my garden looking off. The soil had been disturbed, plants uprooted, but nothing was outright destroyed. I frowned, brushing a hand over the leaves. Something wasn't right. That night, my suspicions were confirmed. I awoke to a rustling sound outside my window. Peering out, I spotted small, dark shapes darting between my vegetable beds. Rabbits. Dozens of them, nibbling away at my carefully tended crops. The next morning, the damage was undeniable. Half of my lettuce was gone. Tomato plants were stripped bare. My once thriving carrots were little more than stubs sticking out of the soil. I stormed over to the Petersons' house, pounding on the door. Mrs. Peterson answered, an insincere smile on her face. "Ah, Robert, what brings you here?" "You know exactly why I'm here," I snapped. "Your little animals had a feast in my garden last night." She feigned surprise. "Oh dear, rabbits are such a nuisance. Hard to control, you know." "Not when they're being deliberately released into my yard," I shot back. She didn't even bother denying it. Instead, she smirked. "You mess with my family, Robert. Actions have consequences." I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. "So do yours." She laughed. "Oh, I'd love to see what you plan to do about it." I turned on my heel and walked away. But what she didn't know was that I had already planned my next move. That night, I set up my security cameras, ensuring they had a clear view of both my yard and the Petersons' property. If they tried this again, I'd have proof. And proof was all I needed. At precisely 2:47 a.m., my cameras caught them. Mr. Peterson, sneaking into his backyard, unlatching the rabbit hutch, and ushering the animals straight toward my garden. And that wasn't all. The footage also showed his boys, laughing, whispering, squatting down to defecate on my garden path. By morning, I had everything I needed, and I was done playing nice. By sunrise, I was ready. The memory card from my security cameras sat snugly in my pocket as I made my way to the Petersons' house. This time, I wasn't knocking. I was calling the police. 20 minutes later, a squad car rolled up. Officer Caldwell, a no-nonsense man with sharp eyes, stepped out. I handed him the footage without a word. As he scrolled through the clips, his lips pressed into a thin line. Releasing animals onto your property, vandalizing it, and he paused, rewinding. His jaw tightened. They did what on your garden path? I nodded grimly. Disgusting, isn't it? Caldwell wasted no time. He marched straight to the Petersons' door and knocked hard. When Mr. Peterson opened up, his face paled at the sight of the officer. "What's this about?" he asked, feigning innocence. Caldwell didn't bother with pleasantries. "We have video evidence of you and your boys trespassing, damaging property, and," he exhaled sharply, "engaging in public defilement." Mr. Peterson's eyes darted to me, burning with rage. "You set us up?" "No," I said evenly. "I just caught you in the act." Mrs. Peterson appeared behind him, face twisted in anger. "You called the cops over a few rabbits?" Caldwell folded his arms. "I suggest you step outside. We need to have a conversation at the station." As they protested, their boys hovered behind them, suddenly silent. The smirks were gone. This time, there was no escape. By nightfall, my garden was finally quiet. The chaos was over. The Petersons had been fined, forced to repair the damages, and their arrogance had been crushed under the weight of undeniable proof. And as I stood on my porch, sipping a well-earned cup of tea, I smiled. Justice at last. Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Would you like more stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss any videos. See you tomorrow.